I sat down one weekend with a spreadsheet and a single clear question. What is the precise number needed in an investment portfolio to retire at 35? Not roughly, not aspirationally, precisely. What I found was not what I was expecting. The number was considerably larger than the standard early retirement formula produces, and the reason it was larger is something most early retirement calculators either skip entirely or quietly understate. Here is the specific detail that changed my whole calculation. At 35, you are not planning for a 30-year retirement. You are planning for a 55-year retirement, and that extra 25 years does not add a proportional cost to the portfolio. It changes the entire structural foundation of how the number is built. By the end of this video, I want to show you the complete calculation, every layer, every variable, and the exact number it produces. Like most people who have spent time in the financial independence conversation, I had a working number in my head: 25 times annual expenses. That is the standard formula derived from the 4% withdrawal guideline that has become the foundational rule of the early retirement movement. Spend $50,000 per year. Need $1,250,000. The arithmetic is clean, the logic is simple, and for a long time I applied it without looking carefully at the assumptions underneath it. Then I did look, and the first assumption I found, the one that matters most for anyone planning to retire at 35 specifically, is that the 4% rule was designed and tested for 30-year retirements, not 55-year ones. The moment I understood that distinction clearly, the number changed, and so did the shape of the entire calculation I was building. I spend way too much time turning financial systems into data you can actually see. If what I'm sharing today is useful to you, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Before any numbers, let me give you the clearest possible picture of why a 55-year retirement is mathematically different from a 30-year one. Think about designing a bridge. A bridge built to carry traffic for 30 years can be engineered with comfortable tolerances, material fatigue calculations, load testing, and maintenance intervals all designed around that specific lifespan. Now give that same bridge a 55-year mandate. Not every element of the original design survives intact under 25 additional years of use. Some tolerances need to tighten. Some materials need upgrading. The original design was sound. It just was not built for what you are now asking it to do. A retirement portfolio is engineered the same way. The 4% withdrawal rate is a sound piece of engineering for the 30-year lifespan it was designed for. A 55-year retirement requires a different specification, and that difference produces a different number, a larger one. Here is the foundational data that everything in this calculation rests on. The 4% withdrawal guideline, meaning you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio value each year and historically have a high probability of not running out of money, was developed from market return and inflation data, covering 30-year retirement periods. Over a 30-year horizon, a 4% annual withdrawal has historically sustained a diversified portfolio approximately 95% of the time. Now watch what happens when that horizon extends to 55 years. At a 4% withdrawal rate over 55 years, the historical probability of the portfolio surviving the full period drops to approximately 78%. That is a 17 percentage point reduction in the probability that the money outlasts the person from one decision, retiring 30 years earlier than conventional retirement age. What restores that probability to a more comparable level is a specific adjustment to one variable. And when I ran through exactly what that adjustment requires, it was the part that changed my whole number most significantly. The first mechanism I needed to understand clearly is how annual expenses are actually calculated for an early retirement starting at 35, because the figure most people use is almost always smaller than the figure their actual retired life will require. Think about budgeting for a long trip abroad. Most people start with the obvious categories: accommodation, food, local transport, but a complete budget includes every expense that will be incurred: healthcare if something goes wrong, equipment replacement, the unanticipated costs that arise in any life lived for months away from the familiar. The categories you skip in the planning phase are the ones that exceed the budget in practice. Housing, food, and transport are the foundation, typically representing 50 to 60% of most household budgets. But here is where a 35-year-old retirement calculation diverges meaningfully from a standard one. Healthcare costs before Medicare eligibility at 65 must be fully self-funded, the number most people use for their expenses, and the number their early retirement will actually cost are not the same figure. Building the calculation on the honest version is the only way to produce a number that holds up over 55 years. Researchers tracking early retirement household spending found that healthcare, premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket costs adds an average of $8,400 to $10,000 per year for a healthy individual in early retirement. That is not a trivial addition. On a $50,000 annual expense baseline, it represents a 16 to 20% increase in the true annual cost of the retirement. If you have made it this far, the next section is where the withdrawal rate adjustment for a 55-year retirement appears in the calculation, and where the full portfolio number finally emerges. If this kind of honest, data-grounded financial picture is useful to you, subscribe to this channel. Every video here is built around the same approach. The second mechanism is the withdrawal rate, and this is where the full picture finally clicks into place. Think about how long a candle burns. A standard candle burned at full intensity lasts a certain number of hours. If you need it to last considerably longer, you have two options: use a larger candle or burn it at a lower setting. A retirement portfolio works the same way. The adjustment financial researchers have found most appropriate for a 55-year retirement horizon is reducing the annual withdrawal rate from 4% to approximately 3%. At 3%, the historical probability of a diversified portfolio surviving a 55-year period is approximately 92%, considerably closer to the 30-year baseline than the 4% rate achieves over the same extended period. At 4%, $50,000 of annual expenses requires $1,250,000. At 3%, the same $50,000 requires $1,667,000. The difference is $417,000 from a single change to a single variable. That $400,000 is the hidden cost most early retirement calculators leave off the screen. Here is the full calculation. Every variable included, nothing softened. Step 1. Establish true annual expenses including healthcare. Using $50,000 as the base and adding $9,000 for healthcare, the real annual expense figure is $59,000. Step 2. Apply the 3% withdrawal rate appropriate for a 55-year retirement. $59,000 divided by 3% equals $1,967,000. Step 3. Calculate the monthly savings required to build that portfolio from age 22 to 35, 13 years at 7% annual return. The required monthly savings, approximately $7,820 per month. To sustain that savings rate at a 50% savings rate, considered aggressive but achievable within the financial independence community, the annual income required is approximately $188,000. That is the complete picture. True expenses, adjusted withdrawal rate, required portfolio, and the monthly savings and income figures that make it reachable, not an estimate, a calculation. Here are the three things I now understand from running these numbers that I did not understand clearly before. The first, the 4% withdrawal rule was designed for 30-year retirements. Applying it to a 55-year retirement starting at 35 introduces a portfolio survival risk most people planning for early retirement have never specifically examined. A 3% withdrawal rate is more appropriate for the longer horizon, and it adds approximately $400,000 to the required portfolio on a $50,000 expense base. The second, true annual expenses for early retirement must include a realistic healthcare allocation before Medicare eligibility. Omitting it produces a number that is smaller and more comfortable than the number the retirement will actually require. The third, the complete number, calculated honestly with every variable included, is larger than most people expect. For $59,000 in real annual expenses, it is $1,967,000. Knowing that number precisely, rather than carrying a vague approximation, is the only starting point from which a genuine plan can be built. Here is exactly how much you need to retire at 35. The answer rests on one primary variable: your true annual expenses, including healthcare, calculated honestly. For $59,000 in true annual expenses, $1,967,000 required, approximately $7,820 per month, over 13 years. For $49,000 in true annual expenses, $1,633,000 required, approximately $6,500 per month. For $69,000, $2,300,000 required, approximately $9,150 per month. The complete formula: your true annual expenses including healthcare divided by 3% equals the required portfolio. 2 honest inputs, 1 clear calculation. The number you need to retire at 35 is not a mystery. It is a calculation, and it is available to anyone willing to run every variable without editing the uncomfortable ones out.